We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AV Rant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. We got lots to get to today. I've got a fun story to tell on a personal level. But before we get to that, we'll talk about what we've been watching this week. So both of us watched Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Tom, what did you think?
How did I not know it was coming out this weekend? Usually
That
I
I
know those
don't
things,
know.
and somebody texted me. It's like, "What did you think?" I'm like, "I haven't seen that. I'm waiting for it to come out on streaming." And they're like, "It's out."
It was promoted, so
I
that's
missed it somehow.
Well,
I
not
am
entirely, because you
also
did watch it.
actively avoiding as many spoilers
Yes.
as possible, which I did. I did not
Was
know
there really that much to spoil in this one? That's a little bit of what we can say. I mean,
Well, I knew the Illuminati was in it.
I guess okay, yeah. Well,
Yeah, I knew
spoiler
that.
alert, folks. There you go.
Whatever.
Tom's
But I
seen
mean,
it, so nothing else
it's really hard to avoid that. If I can't
Little
avoid
bit.
it, you can't either. I knew some of the characters that were, not all of them, but I knew some of the characters that were going to show
Okay.
up in that. So I was excited to see that. I forgot that Sam Raimi had directed it,
Yes.
and as I was watching, I was like, "Boy, this feels like a Sam
Oh,
Raimi
it had
movie." Like
his,
at points,
it had his fingerprints on it. Yeah, for sure.
I really wish that he could have done a little bit more with
Yep.
Wanda.
I wish he could have gone a little bit more full out, because it seemed like he
Yes.
was restrained. It seemed it had Sam Raimi touches, but it definitely felt restrained. Apparently, there were extensive reshoots. I mean, part of that was COVID stuff, so it wasn't entirely like behind the scenes drama or anything like that. But yeah, it felt like it had some studio notes on it for sure.
Right. Surprisingly straightforward.
Indeed.
If you were thinking that a movie called The Multiverse
Right.
of Madness was going to be complex and hard to follow, it is
I
not.
would say
is
it did
a
not live up to
very
the madness part. I did
There
not
was
feel
very
it
little
was madness.
madness.
Although, to be fair, if this were the first Marvel movie you were ever seeing, you would be like,
Yeah.
this is madness. It's because we've been acclimated to so
Right.
much stuff that compared to everything we've already seen, it doesn't feel like madness.
Yes. So the things I really liked about it. So overall, in general, like the movie.
Okay.
Is it my favorite Marvel movie? It is not.
Yeah. I don't know if it could be anybody's favorite, but
It's very safe as far as movies go. I felt like it was very safe.
don't you feel like Marvel does that a lot, where it's like, in the comics, this stuff that is absolutely cosmic in scale is definitely downscaled in the movies. Like just
Oh, there has to be
power,
though.
like,
Yeah.
you know, how powerful things and people are. Everything's downscaled in the movies, it feels
Yes.
like.
But as far as like, so the things that were, and I guess we can say they're spoilers or whatever, but I felt like the person who was the antagonist.
Yes.
Yes, I felt like you had to have foreknowledge of all of these characters. Like you could not just walk into
If
this
you
movie.
haven't watched any of the Disney Plus series,
Right.
like, you could get the gist, but you would feel like you're missing something.
And even I, as somebody who has watched everything multiple times, every single except for the Moon Knight, I haven't seen that one twice yet, but I'm gonna. I have seen everything multiple times. Even I was like, you could have maybe just spent a beat.
I think it would have helped
Really-
regardless, because
Yes.
honestly, one of my criticisms of the movie is, while it very clearly ties into things that happened in some of the Disney Plus series, I felt like they hedged it a little bit. It was like, either really connect it, because to me there was a disconnect between the end of one of the Disney Plus series and everything that happens here, and that gap wasn't really filled in either place. So I was like,
I would agree with
I
that.
was like, either tell us more as though we hadn't watched the Disney Plus series, which would have worked better for the movie, I feel, or
I do too.
or connect it even more strongly to the Disney Plus series, like follow directly on and be like, okay, you gotta watch those, and now we're following on. Don't leave this weird little bit of a disconnect and gap as though we're trying to do it as though maybe you didn't watch the Disney Plus series, and then even if you did, it isn't truly vital. So I was like, they're trying to thread that needle, and I don't think it quite hit. My other criticism was the new character introduced, because that's what we're doing in Marvel movies now, right? We're taking established characters and using them to introduce new characters. That is sort of the status quo of what's happening throughout Phase 4. And I just didn't feel that the new characters' emotional journey definitely wasn't resolved. They set up a little bit of what's sort of driving them, but gave us no resolution. And then the emotional arc that they went on, I'll spoil a little bit here because this is nothing spoilerish for any comic book thing. I feel that there are two characters that are allowed for the resolution of their emotional arc to be I punched the thing. And that's One Punch Man and like Marty
Hulk.
McFly's dad. Okay? Those two characters, I punched the thing, that's their emotional resolution. For I punched the thing to be the emotional resolution of this movie, I was like, I'm not satisfied with that.
Yeah. Okay. So that character, the new character that we were introduced to, I mean, there was just so many other things going on. It was very hard to even really pay much attention to them. They felt very much more like the MacGuffin than they did an actual
got a little
character.
lost in the shuffle there. Yeah. This isn't a character that I am champing at the bit to see again.
And
from what we saw here.
Honestly, I don't even remember them in in any of the comics live. I haven't read much of this, these series and the whole thing about the incursions and all that. I didn't read any of that. I mean, I know about it, but I'm not super familiar. But it's interesting. I mean, it was an interesting character, but you're right. They could have done a little bit more with them. The one thing that I did appreciate is that we didn't have to go back through and rehash all of Doctor Strange's crap again.
Yep.
They kind of touched upon it, and he as a character made a little bit of growth, which was nice. I didn't love the end of the movie, I'll be honest with you. I did not think the end of the
like the end or like I felt Doctor Strange's emotional arc was fine. I was quite happy with that. I thought the symbolism of his watch that worked. I felt like that was all good. So are you taking the end?
The end.
Okay,
end.
Yeah,
yes,
gotcha,
yeah, the end, and I'm like, so what does this mean exactly? Because I'm not sure I like what you're implicating here about Doctor Strange. So I feel like that's one of those things that might get retconned at some point. People are like, oh yeah, don't worry about that
at the end of the first Doctor Strange movie, we set up who we thought the antagonist was going to be, and that kind of went nowhere. I mean, it got touched upon.
But they implied that there has been stuff going on with that character, right? Like they are like, oh yeah, this guy, he's messing with me all the time. And if you don't know, I mean, if you haven't seen the first Doctor Strange movie, it's your own dang fault. But Baron Mordo, who is like one of the main antagonists of Doctor Strange, they hinted he's going to be the next. He's going to be integral in the second movie, and he's there, but more in a cursory sense. And
more like
Doctor Strange is like,
more like people are going to be upset if he isn't in this movie at all. So we'll use him as we'll just throw him in there. Well, okay, so neither of us over the moon about. I just don't want to spend too much time on. I felt like
it was a fine movie. Yeah, it was a fine movie,
and
you
visually,
know what?
Visually very, very good, as we would expect.
Yeah, there was some CGI in there that
there was some ropey stuff, and I assume you watched the IMAX enhanced version because why?
Of course.
Why wouldn't you? Yeah.
Why wouldn't I?
Why wouldn't you? Okay, so the other thing I watched was Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore.
I heard that was a trash fire. So what did you think about it?
I wouldn't call it a trash fire. I would call it a little bit boring. Like there was just no charge to it. There was no like
the last movie had the entire last. The last act was it was a story told in in retrospect. They're all standing in a room, and he's like, "This is what happened a long time ago."
I'll be honest,
that was the end of the movie.
I haven't been a big fan of any of the David Yates Harry Potter done stuff. While they're competent, I don't get anything from them. I don't feel anything from any of the David Yates ones, and that's what 7 movies now. The last 7 Harry Potter movies, I just haven't really affected me that much. So.
I've been very disappointed with the Fantastic Beasts.
Right.
I saw this is the third one, right?
This is the
right?
third
This is
one.
the third one. I've seen the first two. The first one, I was like, ugh.
I mean, I found the first one rather charming, mainly because not of Newt or Dumbledore or anybody, but mainly because of the little love story that was going on. I found that charming, and I found the actors charming, and a bit of the love story between Newt and I'm forgetting the name of the woman he's in love with, because that's how important she is in this third movie. Yeah. So, I found those parts charming. That is just like, it's used within this third movie, but it just, like I say, nothing landed for me emotionally. So fine, competent Mads Mikkelsen, whom I love as an actor, just kind of read his lines. Like, he is capable of doing a lot more. I felt like if Johnny Depp had been in that role, he might have brought a bit more to this very lackluster script, because it's not all Mads Mikkelsen's fault. He wasn't given anything interesting to say, but he also didn't say what was there very interestingly. So if you had someone maybe perhaps a bit more eccentric, could have brought a bit more to the performance potentially, but regardless, that one is you can easily skip this unless you're just really into it. So that's everything I watched.
So we finished. I have not watched the most recent episode of Ms. Marvel yet.
Okay, third episode as we're recording this.
As we're recording the third episode, my youngest son, who's the one that is most interested in watching it with us, was out of town all last week at a camp, so we didn't watch anything. So we caught the last episode of Obi-Wan last night, and we'll watch Ms. Marvel tonight probably.
So was the last episode of Obi-Wan long enough to wrap everything up? Because that was what you said last time.
I felt like Obi-Wan's spiritual journey through getting being disconnected to the Force to becoming more connected with the Force by the end, it was like, and I never say this, they should have talked about it a little bit more. You know what I mean? It was so implied and hinted at, but never actually, nobody, no character, or at no point did anybody even remark upon it. That was like, I think that's what's happening, but nobody's saying
Darth
anything.
Vader directly said it at the end, but by then it was blatantly obvious. So
that
was
by that
hanging
point,
a hat on a hat.
Yeah. So I think this is by far, with the possible exception of WandaVision, the best thing that Disney Plus has done.
Okay.
I would think this is.
I put Loki up there. I liked Loki.
Okay. I'm sitting there next to my wife, and she's the only thing that she really, really connected with was WandaVision.
Okay.
Nothing else has, including this, which she kind of sighed her way through the entire time. It's very annoying. But I felt like this was really, really good.
It was certainly very well made.
You always are going to have the problem of Star Wars. The original A New Hope was made in 1977 or whatever it was, and the special effects, the lightsaber battles, and everybody's like, why do they look? It's only 10 years later, and look, Obi-Wan looks like a million years older.
I don't think watching in chronological order is the way to do Star Wars. I'm a fan of watching in release order. I think that's how it makes sense. So.
But Darth Vader's power in the last two episodes is just exactly what you wanted to see.
Sure.
And Obi-Wan finally coming, up to meet him, and then once again, them fighting was a very good end to this.
Sure.
So the last thing I heard, and I don't know if it's true or not, is that they are having another season of this. Is that
I
true?
don't know. I've heard that they had plans for a trilogy of seasons, 3 separate seasons. Ewan McGregor says he's up for a second season if they want to do it. I've heard it's not.
God, he's such a phenomenal.
It hasn't been green lit yet, so whatever.
I like that his very last line is so satisfying in this series. So it is very good. Okay. I also watched The Bear, which is on Hulu here in the States. I don't know where it would be any place else. It's a FX series, and it's about a guy who inherits his brother's restaurant.
Okay.
And it's a little kind of dive neighborhood restaurant, and he is a John Beard award-winning chef. With his own issues, of course, because everybody's got issues. So he is taking over this restaurant and trying to take it from this, kind of hash slinging, spaghetti serving, crude place to something a lot better. And I've only seen the first 2 episodes. I mean, I think the entire season is out probably, but I've only seen the first 2 episodes. It's frenetic. It's a very small space in the kitchen, and and I have worked in many kitchens, and it's a little bit amped up compared to what I've been in kitchens I've been in the past, but it is not unrealistic how much yelling and behind you and to your left and all this other stuff that goes on, and the emotions because of the pressure, the intense pressure people are under in there. I like it so far. So it's got a lot of language in it. So if you're opposed to people saying bad words, you might not want to watch this one. But it's quite good. At least the first 2 episodes so far seem to be quite good. And I'm now up to the year 2020 in the Great British Bake Off, whatever it's called. Okay. So now I'm like PTSDing through the season as everybody's talking about bubbling and everything else. So, and I think my eldest son is got COVID right now. He hasn't tested positive yet, but he's quarantined in his room because he's sick and doesn't feel well. His throat hurts and blah blah blah. So
update on my end.
I don't know where he got it, but he didn't get it from us.
Update on my end. Yes, my brother-in-law and nephew got it. Everybody seems to be on the mend. So yeah,
that's good.
That's been the way it went over there. Nothing shocking. So why don't we tell people who we are and how to get in touch with us, and then I'll get into my quick little story.
All right, this is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to avrant.com. Find our old episodes, our show notes, and our Flickr albums that will have all the pictures of the things that we're talking about, so that if my paintbrush of words does not paint you a picture that you can understand, there's an actual picture there, because that's what I'm trying to describe. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant, where you can see our recording sessions, which will I'm going to have to denoise this thing because there's a lot of noise going on.
I'll take the noise out. Just send me the audio. I'll take the noise out.
Okay, I have to denoise my side when I do the thing. But you can watch our YouTube recording sessions. Contact Rob directly. Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter's at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter's at avrant_Tom. Now, I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you do that is going to avrant.com. Click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. And there it will take you to a PayPal donation site. So we want to thank Kevin, Michael, Bill, and Aras this week for being our listeners of the week. Thank you very much, Kevin, Michael, Bill, and Aras.
Yeah, Kevin, Michael, Bill, and Aras. Thank you all very much for the PayPal donations. That's more PayPal donations from more people than is normal. So that's very, very nice of you. Thank you so much.
Very much more than normal. Yeah, so some weeks we got none.
Indeed.
So 4 is, it's funny that works out that way. We also have 139 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon's a service where you can sign up to become a monthly contributing listener. So every month they'll take some money from you, a minimum of $1. You tell them how much, and give most of it to us. So we want to thank our 139 patrons, including Bertrand and Daniel. So thank you, Bertrand, Daniel, and everybody else over at Patreon. I have to sneeze.
Yep. It didn't quite happen. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast is the place to go to make an automatic monthly donation. Big thanks to our 139 patrons. Bertrand, Daniel, thank you for being 2 of them. Nothing less satisfying than feeling a sneeze coming on and not actually sneezing.
It's still there.
That was the worst of anticipation.
Say it. Patient. All right, we got some... I'm sorry. If you can't support us financially, we understand. Just do something for us and let us know what you did. So Bertrand alerted Rob via tweet or DM when our question@avrant.com email address was having undeliverable issues. So Clint basically, I don't really think he did much, but because he didn't have to. I think the server was just like,
he definitely did something on Saturday because
yeah. So he did what he needed to do to try to fix that. We're having some sort of server side issues.
Well,
so it was going up and down.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Bertrand, for alerting me, because I wouldn't have known as early had he not alerted me to that. And it was important because usually the questions we get, a lot of them come in over the weekend. So this was Friday that he alerted me. So that was tremendously helpful. Yeah. It seemed like it might have been something on my Gmail end, because the question at AV Rant gets forwarded to my Gmail account. That's how I see it. And the error messages in there were like, yeah, there's a thing in Gmail where Gmail is rejecting it because it can't see the original IP address as having been filtered through question@avrant.com. So
that's so dumb. It's like it's worked for how many years?
I know.
And now it's going to stop you working.
Yes, yeah. This email address where things have been forwarded for years and years and years. You want us to block that now, right? Just automatically. Surely that's what you want from us. But yeah, so I was testing things out. It was like some things were getting through, others weren't. So on Saturday, I contacted Clinton. I was like, can you just, instead of it forwarding to my Gmail, forward it to my live.ca, my Outlook account instead? He's like, yeah. So he made that change on a weekend. Thankfully he was checking his emails on the weekend. Yeah. And so, I mean, it wasn't like a huge amount of work, but it was more than zero. And he did it on the weekend. So big thanks to Clint DeBoer for doing that as well. And thanks to Bertrand. And it seems to be working fine. So.
Oh, good.
It's all
so
all's well that ends well.
Try again.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, if you do not hear your name mentioned, please send it again. It is entirely possible it got lost in the email shuffle.
Yeah. Dale talked us up to Audio Mute. Whatever. When he called them about ordering more acoustic panels, Infinite Gary went ahead with his rhythmic F12400 subwoofer order and filled in AV Rant podcast in the Where Did You Hear About Us section. Thank you. Dale, Lieutenant Sulu.
I mean, there's two Dales, so I've separated them. One is Dale P, and one is Dale, quote unquote, Lieutenant Sulu, because that's how his emails come in. So we've referred to him as that before when we didn't know his name was Dale.
Okay. He bought the gray screen paint from Sherwin-Williams that we always recommend. He told the folks at Sherwin-Williams store about us and how we suggest this specific paint for home theater. So I appreciate that.
Yep. Hey, we might get a new listener. You never know. So thank you, Dale. Thank you, Gary. And thank you, other Dale.
That's right. And then we got another, I guess,
the same Dale. One of the Dale P.
One of those Dales. One of the Dales. Mike and Bill sent me photos with permission to use it for AV Gadgets. I got them all in a row from Rob.
Yeah,
so
I chucked them all over there this morning. So yeah, you spammed your inbox with those.
And we got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Bertrand, Dale, Daniel, who's a member of our 2 Hour Plus Club. He went with our advice and got the Sennheiser HD 560S open back over-the-ear headphones for nighttime listening. He also tried the Monoprice M1069C. He wouldn't say he heard a significant difference between them, but the Sennheisers were much more comfortable to wear and they cost less. So he thanks us for the suggestion. I don't doubt that. Those Monoprices, if I remember correctly, those are real big ones.
Yeah, they're quite big. Yep.
Yeah. Lieutenant Sulu, the other Dale, also says thank you, and Mike, who is a member of our 2 Hour Club, said thank you. So we've got notes of gratitude from Bertrand, Dale, Daniel, Dale, and Mike. So both Dales, Daniel or Mike.
I'll say them one more time. Bertrand, Dale, Daniel, other Dale, and Mike. Thank you all so much for sending in the notes of gratitude. The notes of encouragement are super appreciated. Big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. And one of our listeners, who we've been friends with for years and years, but of course never met in person. I have now met more people through the podcast than Tom, because Tom and I have never actually met in person, and I got to meet up in person with Herb Singleton from Cross Spectrum Acoustics and Cross Spectrum Labs. Cross Spectrum Labs is where we highly recommend you go if you want a measurement microphone, if you want to dig into Room EQ Wizard, or if you want to have a calibrated microphone to use with Dirac. If you want a really properly done, individually calibrated microphone, Cross Spectrum Labs is where we've been sending people for years and years, and Herb is the president and founder of CS Acoustics and Cross Spectrum Labs. So he was in town in Vancouver for a conference, an acoustics conference, which is what he deals with. And so he hit me up and he was like, hey, I'm in town, want to meet up, and very generously treated me to dinner. Yeah. That was super nice of him. Felt a bit weird because he's the one visiting my town and he's the one treating me to dinner. That's how it went. He insisted.
Whenever I get a listener who shows up and wants to meet up for something, I'm always like, I don't do what. I mean, I am more introverted than I am extroverted, and those sorts of interactions, I mean, are very uncomfortable. Like I like taking my wife to that stuff if I can, because she's like totally extroverted and will just kind of take control of everything. But me by myself, I'm like, oh no, shouldn't I pay for this? I feel like I should
Indeed.
pay for this.
So I certainly always have a little bit of the social anxiety going in. We haven't ever spoken in voice, let alone in person, just through text. But I mean, we were instantly at ease. It was kind of funny because like we've got the same haircut. We actually have like similar body types. If it weren't for our like skin tones being different, you might have thought we were like related or something like that, because we talk similarly, got along really well. At least I felt that way. Hopefully he felt the same. There was certainly no lag in our conversation at any point, no awkward pauses. So he's taller and better looking than I, which is not a high bar to clear. So that is that is certainly fine on that front. But yeah, I had a great time, talked about a plethora of things, but I got to specifically ask about a couple of things that we say commonly, but love to talk to the person who's, you know, his trade, he's a licensed engineer for one thing, and then his trade is in acoustics and vibration and damping and all of those things. And so key was Aris's questions, you know, going along with this new house that he's got, and the question that he had about is there any type of like curtain or movable partition you could put up to soundproof a room? Of course, people always ask us about, is there a way you could use curtains to as acoustic treatment within a room, not necessarily soundproofing, but acoustic treatment. So Herb, being the consummate engineer and scientific mind that he is, and we felt the same about this. The older we get and the more we learn, the less certain and the less like concrete any of our answers get. We're always willing to hedge our bets. But about this, Herb was quite emphatic. He's like, no, nope. It's you just when it comes like, can you block vocal range with a curtain, you know, like a thick vinyl curtain? Yes, you can block vocal range. If you're trying to block, you know, 110 decibel, 20 hertz with a thing that can physically move in any fashion, no, it just becomes another membrane and that sound is getting through. He did mention he actually uses a very thick commercial ugly curtain for acoustic treatment purposes in some applications. Like it's a thing that can be hung from a curtain rod type of thing, but it is very thick, very heavy, not good looking. And so if the idea was I'm just going to put up curtains that look nice and that's going to be my acoustic treatment, does not fit that bill. It's just there is such a thing as a, like, you know, acoustic treatment that can be hung on a curtain rod. But yes, we can imagine making something along those lines. So that was really nice. Very glad that I got to meet him. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to meet again in the future.
All right. Well, Herb, come to Florida.
That's right.
It's hot as heck.
He mentioned he's got to find an excuse to get to Florida.
It is. So my particular town, like I have lived in a lot of places in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is what the town I live in, is phenomenal. It is such a great town as far as, you know, access to beaches, great beaches, tons of restaurants, lots of culture. It's a really one of my favorite places I've ever lived, but everywhere around here is absolute garbage as far as I'm concerned. Not all, I mean, not completely. I'm not going to say it's completely. There's lots of, you know, what about Ybor City? Yeah, it's fine. Whatever. That's fine. Traffic sucks. But I completely understand people like, I don't want to go to Florida. I don't blame you. I don't want to be here. I mean, I don't want to be here. I lived in Jacksonville for 5 years. You could blow that town up and I'd be like,
there are news stories that come out of Florida. That's for sure.
Yes. And they come from here too. But anyways, this little corner that I found, and I didn't find it, like I discovered it, like Columbus or something. But I have found myself in is really quite nice. So I recommend people come to St. Pete. Okay. Other than that, St. Augustine is also very nice, which is near Jacksonville. And I haven't really been south, so I don't know what's down there. It could be dumpster fire for all I know. I just assume so because it's in Florida.
Well, I put too much news in this list, so let's not dilly-dally on any of the talking about it.
Yeah, you got a lot here.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting us to go this long, but here we are.
Yes, I know. We go long. And in the news, Netflix will introduce an ad-supported tier probably by the end of this year. Ted Sarandos?
I think Sarandos. I think so.
Yeah. The co-CEO made it clear that this will be a new, cheaper tier with ads. Existing Netflix tiers will remain ad-free. No force in earth is going to get me to do that.
So, I mean, it was rumored, now it's confirmed, and the other part confirmed is that it's not replacing anything. This will be an additional one to bring it in at a lower price. So, there, just confirmation.
SVS has expanded their SoundPath accessories lineup with the addition of ultra-high-speed certified HDMI cables. They come in 1, 2, and 3 meter lengths for $30, $40, and $50, respectively. They have matched aluminum shells on the ends with 24K gold-plated connectors, which make a total big difference there.
They won't
The internal wires... The internal wires are pure copper with aluminum and mylar shielding, a polyurethane jacket, and SVS's trademark blue and black braided cotton sheath. Being fully tested and certified, they'll pass 48 gigabits per second and comply with the current HDMI 2.1a standard. So
but not Amendment 1. These aren't
about
powered.
The amendment?
Yep. Yeah. They don't need to be. They're on 3 meters max.
And just like we expect from SVS, they come with a 5-year unconditional warranty. And if you're keeping track, SVS's SoundPath cable lineup now includes terminated and bulk speaker wire, RCA, XLR, and optical audio interconnects, an RCA Y splitter, and these new ultra high speed HDMI cables. And that's not an unreasonable price. I don't think it's not the cheapest that you can. I'm sure you can go to Amazon and find something cheaper.
Absolutely.
These are reasonable prices, and if you're already, the thing about SVS and other manufacturers like that is you're already there buying something. Mm-hmm. It's just,
and these are a little bit prettier. That's the reason to get it.
Yes.
It's actually the reason to get these is that black and blue sheath on the outside. Yeah. Honestly, it's the looks, because the price is. You're not getting this because it is the cheapest. It isn't, but it's not crazy overpriced. And if you want something that looks prettier, this fits the bill.
Okay. Let's talk about LG's 2022 ultra short throw projector lineup. Right away, there are some common characteristics across all 3 of these new models. They're 4K DLP with laser light engines. They mention HDMI 2.1, but that's really just eARC and auto low latency mode, or ALLM. Bandwidth is limited to 24 gigabits per second, and they all top out at 4K 60. None of them will do 4K 120 or VRR, variable refresh rate.
Yeah, that's right. So these are not gaming powerhouses, but they will do 4K 60 with HDR.
Okay. They all use WebOS with streaming apps built in, because where else would you want your streaming apps but in your projector? And Dolby Atmos pass-through via eARC, obviously. Mm-hmm. They all support HDR10, HLG, and LG's frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, no Dolby Vision or HDR10+.
And yeah, it's the dynamic tone mapping that I want to harp on as the reason I'm kind of excited about this lineup. There are, of course, quite a few ultra-short throw projectors out there. Why would you choose LG over anybody else? It's the frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping. That's the thing to me that puts these over the top. And since these are, in my opinion, competitively priced, and by the early reviews of at least 2 of these models, very competitive in performance, and then the frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping puts them over the top of other choices when it comes to HDR performance. So that's why I'm excited about these.
Okay. So first up, there's a new entry level, and we put that in quotes because it's not this cheap.
It's not cheap, but this is the entry level of the series, for sure.
Ultra short throw are expensive. Mm-hmm. The HU715QW, because
and I did include those last letters because they become important. The last 2 letters on the end there.
Okay. QW for $3,000. It has a white finish and a pair of 20-watt speakers behind its gray front grille. It has the front grille is on the by. Which part do you consider to be the front?
The part that if your eyes were level with it, you'd be looking at on its face.
Okay, so what I consider to be the back, which is behind the light. The light goes in the other direction. So the light, I would always
it's in front of the screen and firing backwards of itself, I suppose. But
yes.
No, what you would see if you got yourself level with it and looked forward, what you see is a gray grill.
When I read that, I thought they were firing towards the screen.
Yeah,
no. All right, got it. It uses a smaller 0.47-inch 1080p resolution DLP chip that is wobbled 4 times per frame to create 4K resolution images. A single blue laser plus yellow phosphor light engine keeps the price down, but a color wheel is still utilized, resulting in only 86% of DCI P3 color. It has a maximum light output of 2500 lumens, and you'll need to place it 8.5 inches away from the wall to throw 100 100-inch image. So there you go.
Yeah, so it sticks out a little bit. Yeah. But $3,000.
Next up, it's the replacement for the outgoing HU85, which was $5,000. That's replaced by the HU915QE, not QW, QE, for $6,000, so double the price of the last one, but $1,000 more than the one that's replaced.
That's right.
White finish, 2.2 channel, 40-watt speakers behind its gray front grille. Again, firing forwards, whatever, firing towards the listener. This uses a larger 0.66-inch DLP chip with its half 4K resolution that gets wobbled twice per frame. It uses a triple laser system, although it isn't actually green, red, and blue lasers. Instead, it's a red laser, 2 blue lasers, one of which excites a phosphor to create green, but no color wheel. And this one reaches 84% of DCI-P3.
94%. 94%.
94, what did I say?
84, you said.
I was thinking about the other one.
That's right.
94, so a lot more. Maximum light output goes up to 3,700 lumens, a big increase over the HU85's 2,700 lumens, so 1,000 more lumens. And it sits just 3.9 inches away from the wall to create a 100-inch image. That's what I want, one of those. Lastly, this new model aimed at home theater enthusiasts, the HU915QB. They all have different last letters.
Yeah.
W, Q, E, Q, B.
That's right. That's why I had to include them.
But they're 915, 915, 715. Whatever. Why don't they all just why? Anyways, this one's $6,500. So it's only $500 more than the last one.
That's right.
It's very similar to the QE, using the same chip and triple laser light engine, but there's some color filters in place that let it reach full DCI-P3 color at the expense of reducing maximum light output to 3,000 lumens, and the case is black. So that's the one I want. So if anybody wants to send me one.
That is the home theater one. That is, it has ever so slightly deeper black levels because the light has been filtered a little bit. So that is the highest performance one. It is the most expensive, but it is not the brightest one. It is very clear that the black case is targeted at the slightly darker setting, but that's because that's the one that's getting the 100% of DCI-P3 color, and the ever so slightly deeper black levels. The one in the white case is clearly aimed at the lit living room. They're just going for maximum light output. And then the lower cost one has the single laser and not as wide color and all the things you would expect to give up, but for half the price. All three have that frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping. So if you're looking for an ultra-short throw projector, definitely have a look at LG's lineup. They're available now.
Some comments from listeners. Nathan wanted to share even more published guidelines in addition to the Dolby and Turnoff guidelines he shared previously, which, by the way, today I published, so Tuesday, for whoever's listening to this, I published an article about that what we call cross-firing.
Cross-firing, extreme toe-in, yes.
Yeah, toe-in position. And I tried to explain it as best I can, and because we've talked about it a lot on this podcast, and as somebody who's talked about it with you quite a bit, it wasn't until I really wrote it down and kind of went through it that I started to kind of understand what the point here is.
Okay.
So check that out over there. It does... it does make sense to actually position your speakers this way if you are worried about that center image staying centered on the screen. Yeah, not just
creating as wide a sweet spot as you can, particularly if you're sitting quite close to your screen. So I utilize that cross-firing technique in my own little home theater. I have my front right speaker basically aimed straight at the face of the person who would be sitting in the leftmost seat. So if you're imagining, starting with the speakers firing straight forward into the room, then rotating them, towing them in so that they're firing straight at the middle seat, keep turning it further until it's firing like across the face of the person in the middle seat. The front right speaker firing at the seat on the left, the front left speaker firing at the seat on the right. But it does work in creating a wider sweet spot where the phantom center image works across a wider seating area in the middle.
So Nathan wanted to share some more guidelines, this time from the Consumer Technology Association, or the CTA, which is formerly the CEA, Consumer Electronics Association.
Yes, but they are the CTA now.
CTA sounds like they control trains.
Or the Central Time Authority, maybe they're part of Loki.
Maybe. So the CTA is a whole section of the publications store for residential systems with their most popular articles all being available for free. Watch out, there's resellers online charging as much as $100 for the freely available documents. So, whatever.
So go straight to the CTA website. We'll have a link right to them.
That's right. The California Transit Association. You have to register an account with the CTA, but it's free, so no reason not to have a look. Nathan specifically pointed out the Dolby. I'm sorry, where did Dolby come from? Pointed out the home theater video design and home theater audio design docs. So I don't know what those say. There's just a link to them, so I'm sure they say something.
So I mean, I read through them. Honestly, nothing that's a shock. If you've been listening to this podcast, I don't think there was anything I came across that disagreed with anything we talked about. The documents definitely read like a living document that has been updated over time. Because there are definitely some of the way things are described. It's pretty clear there were different authors at different times who contributed to the articles as they exist now. So that's sort of the way that it felt, knowing a bit of that experience, when they're talking about how to set up stereo imaging and then get into surround sound and then get into subwoofers. It's pretty obvious that things were added at different times to the document without necessarily having fully revised what was already there before. But yeah, nothing super shocking in there. But if you just like to see it in black and white from an organization that has credentials and you don't just want to listen to me or just listen to Tom on a podcast, then this can reinforce things. And I certainly give it the stamp of approval. There's nothing I disagree with in there.
Mike reached out on Twitter to a whole bunch of home theater type people, including Rob. Mm-hmm. Mike was trying to figure out why his TV was turning itself off 15 minutes into any movie anytime he tried to play a physical disc.
Sounds like fun.
It's like HDMI CEC. It's gotta be. Credit to Mark for being the first in the group to suggest HDMI CEC was somehow to blame, but Rob asked if maybe a streaming device or game console was set to go to sleep after 15 minutes of non-use. He suspected that, even though Mike was only having the problem when he was playing physical discs, some other device was probably waking up whenever the TV powered on, then detecting the TV was set to the disc's player's input and putting itself back into standby mode after 15 minutes and powering off the TV when it did so, all because of HDMI CEC. Posted by Mike, I never thought to check the settings on my Apple TV. That was the problem. Apple TV goes to sleep after 15 minutes and it turns the TV off. CEC, CE sucks. Everyone should know this. Okay? I get so irritated when I hear people are like, oh, all you have to do is just do this. I'm like, yeah, you just said HDMI CC. You don't know that you said it, but you said it.
Yeah,
and I know it's supposed to work, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work the way it's supposed to.
The problem with HDMI CC is every manufacturer assumes that their device is the only device connected. That you have you have a television and one other thing connected to that TV. Nothing else. We give you 4 HDMI inputs, but you only ever use one of them. We definitely don't assume that you have an audio system in this chain. Just one source and one TV, and that works fine. As soon as you get any more complicated than that, because he was like, this has to be something to do with my AV receiver, right? Like, that was Mike's thinking. He's like, it's got to be, but it only happens with discs. I was like, I don't think it's any of those three things, your AV receiver, your disc player, or your television. I think it's some other source, and it turned out to be. So glad that got resolved in that chain. Ridiculous the way CEC works, but just reinforced it.
Right. All right, some questions here. Let's get into it. Aris and an anonymous listener question. These are questions about subwoofers. So we're grouping these together.
Yes.
So Aris went to ABT Electronics showroom and got to check out the SVS PB2000 Pro, 3000, 4000, and SB16 Ultra. I'm sorry, let's go back. PB2000 Pro, the PB3000, the SB4000, so it's the sealed one, and the SB, which is again sealed, 16 Ultra.
Yeah.
It did not tell him enough as to whether he should go sealed or ported because they sound the same. All right. If he encloses the room, it'll be around 2,700 cubic feet.
Which, as we've discussed, we don't think you're going to end up doing. This is the new house that RS has an offer in on. We haven't actually heard if they've closed on that yet, but offer was in and offer was accepted. So we talked about that at length last week. That was the last question we were talking about. Right. So this question came in a little bit before, like he hadn't heard all of that information from last week. So he was like, maybe there'll be a way to close in this room. But yeah, that's where we're the context
we said
for this
no,
question.
But if he does, he will definitely have at least 2 subwoofers, quite possibly 4. I'm going to tell you, I cannot say this enough. The last 2 subwoofers should be the last 2 things you buy. I mean,
he actually has a question specifically about the 4 versus 2. So.
All right, here we go. There we go. He read an Audioholic's review of the SB16 Ultra that while its ported sibling, the PB16 Ultra, might have given the deepest frequencies a more earthquaking shudder, the SB16 Ultra could still plumb the depths, just not with the crushing power of the PB16 Ultra. Whatever. God, what a bunch of BS. That's my.
I mean, objectively,
almost 20 years of experience. My interpretation of what that is. Okay, what Rob's about to say is true, which is objectively, measurably,
that's right.
Yes, what this person has said is true. There is no way that you're going to convince me that reviewer or me or you or anybody else is going to put those 2 subwoofers in the room, close their eyes, and be able to pick out one versus the other. They're going to sound identical.
I mean, room would have to be big enough. Yes, if you measure at 20 hertz, you crank the volume knob as high as it goes on the SB16 Ultra, and you crank the volume knob as high as it goes on the PB16 Ultra, and then you measure those maximum outputs at 20 hertz. The PB16 Ultra will put out a higher sound pressure level at 20 hertz than the SB16 Ultra will. That is a fact. SVS will not deny it. Their own measurements back that up, and that is the truth. You would need a very large room to actually get to the point where you are not exceeding what your ears will tolerate before you reach the limits of the SB16 Ultra, let alone the PB16 Ultra, but that is where the review is coming from. Yeah.
Well, he wants every last shudder. Yeah. Well, turn the AC down and shiver for a while and then call it good. But the reviews were of single subwoofers, not duals or quads. So if it were, say, 4 SB16s versus 2 PB16s, would the earthquaking shudders be close to equal? They are already close to equal. They are already just about identical. Stop it. And could 4 sealed subs actually provide any sort of advantage over 2 ported subs, or perhaps even 4 ported subs for that matter? These are the advantages. They're smaller, easier to place, and the more subs you have, as long as you get them in groups of 2 and place them properly in a rectangular enclosed room, which you will not have, they will give you a more even bass response across every seat. Now, does it matter if you get the SBs versus the PBs? Only if your room is so big that the SBs are too small and the PBs are not.
Right.
In your case, your 2,700 cubic foot room, these are all too big.
Yeah, if you did enclose this room, I wouldn't be going 16 ultras. But I mean, we could have the instance. I think let's put the overkill out of our minds. Let's say he was talking about getting 4 SB1000 Pros versus 2 PB1000 Pros, because that is the instance where a single SB1000 Pro in 2,700 cubic feet is not going to give you full reference volume at 20 hertz.
Absolutely.
It just doesn't have that output capability. Whereas the PB1000 Pro, particularly a pair of them, is getting pretty darn close. It's getting you to that 110 dB range, maybe not the full 115 in 2,700 cubic feet, but it's getting you up into acceptable reference volume range. The SB1000 Pros are not. So if you had 4 SB1000 Pros versus 2 PB1000 Pros, and in all instances you're placing them across the room from each other, not stacking them or something like that, what you would get with the 4 sealed is you would add 3 decibels versus 2 sealed, right? So you have 2 sealed, you add 2 more sealed, you would only get 3 decibels more output. Whereas the PB1000 Pro versus the SB1000 Pro down at 20 hertz, that already has, I think it's about 9 decibels more output, just 1 for 1. So if you have 2 PB1000 Pros, you're starting where the single PB1000 Pro starts and then adding 3 decibels with the second one across the room from it. With the SB1000 Pro, you're going to add a second one first. That's going to increase things by 3 dB. So now there's like a 6 dB difference between 2 SB1000 Pros versus 1 PB1000 Pro. Then we add another 3 dB, but if we also added a second PB1000, is a 6 dB difference still. That's where we've ended up in this. So you can work it out so that if you're on the low end of things, right? A single one, maybe you're getting like an SB 3000 is maybe on the edge. Certainly like an SB 2000 Pro wouldn't quite get you to full reference volume down at 20 hertz. If you had 4 of those, you've basically added 6 decibels to its native output of a single one. You're probably there now. Like with 4 SB 1000 Pros, you're probably there. Whereas a single PB2000 Pro would already be there, and then you're only getting the second one to add more uniformity. You're not doing it for any sort of headroom. So there are those instances where, the 4 sealed ones are necessary to get you to the threshold of full reference volume, but that's only if the single one can't already do it. If we're on the overkill end that he's talking about, the 16 Ultras, it doesn't matter. You've got headroom to spare with a single one of either of them in 2,700 cubic feet. But if his room ends up being open the way that we expect it will be, we don't particularly want to try and hit 115 decibels at 20 hertz because that means the whole house is experiencing something close to that. I mean, it wouldn't actually be that just because of distance and some loss hitting walls of that. But, the whole house is going to be really, really loud if it's 115 decibels inside the theater area. But if that's actually what you want to do and you're only ever going to do that when everybody else is out of the house or they're not going to be bothered by it, well then yeah, you might need that just crazy output capability to actually get that sound pressure level inside the theater area. So I think that does it. I think he's wondering about the whole everything you see about sealed versus ported, that somehow sealed is just inherently sound this way and ported just somehow inherently sounds that way. There's a kernel of truth to it, which is why we can't just say that's completely false.
Yeah.
It's that if no care, let's imagine no care is taken, you just take a driver, take an amp, and just change the boxes that you put them in, well, then you'll get the situation where the sealed box starts to roll off at a higher frequency, but at a shallower slope. The ported box stays flat to a lower frequency, but then rolls off more steeply. The sealed box will have higher distortion as you go way, way down in frequency, but the ported box will have higher group delay. There'll be a little bit of a delay in how long it takes for the sound to get to full level because there's resonance in the port. That is sort of the blanket general if no care is taken. But in the case of something like SVS where they control everything with DSP, it keeps the distortion of the sealed box under control. They can extend the output by boosting it a bit versus just the natural roll-off it was have. And in the case of the ported box, they can control that group delay, and they're designed very well. So in the end, with careful design, the performance is way more similar than different, and I think that answers that question.
Okay. So along similar lines, Anonymous wants to know, in a very small enclosed room, under 1,200 cubic feet, which is like a bedroom, we've recommended to other listeners that a pair of SB1000 Pro subs will get the job done, but the physical size and price were not a problem. Would there be any advantage to going with a pair of PB1000 Pros instead? No, not. I mean, technically, they. I
mean,
think
you'd
they
have
like
more
1 or 2
headroom.
dB. Well, again, this is your. How many times have I said it? When you overbuy for your subwoofer, you overbuy subwoofers. All you're paying for is the ability to turn them down more. So you would have more headroom, meaning that if the answer to your question is no. There is no real benefit. I think the PB1000s play like 1 or 2 hertz lower, like
as far as linearity goes.
Yeah, but it's nothing you're going to ever notice. So what Rob is saying is that there's more headroom, meaning that what I just said is it's the same thing. You get to turn the volume down more on the PB1000.
Or apply more EQ to it to get them equal.
Yeah, that's right. But which you shouldn't have to do in a small enclosed room like this.
Well, I mean,
throw them in the corners.
If you had a couple of PB1000 Pros in an enclosed 1,200 cubic foot space, you could have enough room gain in there that you would have to turn down the low frequencies a fair amount to get it to linear. So where I could see this potentially being desirable for someone is there are people who like to have their deep bass boosted, like we saw in those Harman documents from Dr. Floyd Toole. There's like a standard that has a 20 decibel boost at 20 hertz versus strict linearity. And if that's what you're going for, you might need the ported output even in that smaller room. Like if you're going for like 20 decibels louder than where the signal actually said to play, well, then the SB isn't going to get you there. So I'm not going to say there's 0 instances where it would have any use. That is basically it. I would then further say, if that's what you want, you've decided, I want the gigantic box physically that's too big for a 1,200 cubic foot room, but I want it, and I want ported so that I can have 20 decibels louder than the signal said to be versus actually what the signal said to be. I will just point you to Monoprice's Monolith M10 V2 because it's $150 less expensive, or actually 150, 250, 150. I think that's right.
I don't know.
I forget how much the PB1000 Pro costs now. Maybe it's... no, there's only one finish. Whatever it is, it's cheaper. The M10 V2 is cheaper than the PB1000 Pro with very similar output and extension. So I'll just
and if you're thinking someday you're going to move out of this room and you want your subs... You want to have you've got the room for it right now, and you think someday you're going to move and the room you're going to go to can't possibly be any smaller than what you already have.
Yeah.
Then getting a slightly oversized sub gives you more potential to be able to use those subs in your new room. Now, I don't like purchasing subwoofers or speakers that way. I think that's it's usually a rabbit hole that just does nothing but suck money out of you for absolutely no benefit. Because most of the time when you move to your new space, no matter how much you spent on your subs or your speakers or whatever, you can't anticipate what that space is going to be like, how your speakers will sound in there, and just whether or not you are even going to want to keep those same speakers. Like, you may just get to the point, like, let's say you're living where you're living right now for 5 years. 5 years from now, are you going to want to have your same subwoofers? Probably. But if you have the money for bigger, nicer, different brand new subwoofers, and are you going to stick with your same ones just because they technically will still fit in your space, or will you say, "No, I'll sell these and get these new shiny ones that don't have the dings and the nicks on them, and I haven't been living with them for 5 years." Buy what you need for right now. So that's where I kind of end up erring on that side. But I could see the argument for, well, if I get the PB1000s and I go to a slightly larger room, I won't have to buy new subs.
Yeah, I mean,
fine.
SVS does have their free two-way shipping. You could actually try one of each and see for yourself. The other thing is, please build a cardboard model of it, because this is like an 11-foot by 12-foot room. You might not truly comprehend how big a PB1000 or an M10 V2 from Monolith really is, or SVS has their augmented reality little thing that you can do. Bring up their website on your phone and bring up the PB1000 Pro, and you can see an augmented reality version of it in your room. I still think the cardboard box is even better because you truly feel what it is, but you can get a pretty good visual representation with that augmented reality thing. So I highly recommend that because that's free.
So RS says, I seem to scoff anytime he mentions getting 4 subs instead of just 2. Is there really no advantage? Anthony Grimani, whatever his name is, and Gene from Oleoholics have both detailed how 4 subs can provide some advantage over just 2. I do scoff. I scoff all the time, and it's not because they don't provide an advantage. I've never claimed that. I've never claimed that there's no benefit to having 4 subs. My claim is that it is a butt ton of money for very little advantage. I mean, it is objectively true. If you have a rectangular room fully enclosed and you properly place 4 subs, you will have more even base throughout the entire
And even
space.
if you don't have an enclosed rectangular room, having 4 subs would let you fully utilize multi-sub optimizer software, whereas with just a pair of subs, multi-sub optimizer, it functions but doesn't give you the full capabilities of what you could do if you had 4 subs. So there are advantages to the 4 subs if your goal is very uniform response across a large seating area.
There's your problem there,
Think
Hoss.
about that, because a lot of times all you care about is 1 or 2 seats. That's very often the case.
And that's why I scoff.
Right.
I don't scoff because it doesn't make a difference. I scoff because it makes a difference in places you will never be. You will never sit in those seats. You'll even care about the people who do,
right?
Because they don't care.
Yeah,
if you were in a 30 or 40 seat theater or a 20 10 seat theater, and you said, I want to get 4 subs, I would be like, okay, well, that makes a little bit more sense.
The sort of theaters that Anthony Gramani builds, that's what we're talking about. His theaters start at, like, I think the cheapest one he's ever built was $130,000, and they usually start at like $300,000. So it is a larger seating area than a lot of us are dealing with. But if that's
and no offense
then it makes sense.
To either one of them, but they do not qualify many of their statements. Okay, they make these statements as if they were true for everyone, and it's not the case. It is true objectively that some things, that 4 subs is better than 2, as for uniformity, but it doesn't make a difference if all you care about is that those 2 or 3 seats smack dab in the middle of that couch. And really, it's only the 1 seat that you'll be sitting in. Does that mean that you should just get 1 subwoofer and optimize it for that 1 seat? I mean, in the many cases, we have suggested
that's not out of the question.
When it is literally just the 1 person in that seat. But, you get a very large benefit from going from 1 to 2 subwoofers because of it's not just for the entire couch, it's also for that single seat. It helps for that single seat, but once you go past that single seat doesn't get that much better. It's everything else that gets better. In my experience,
it's the value proposition for us. The value in going from a single sub to 2 subs is big. It's big. Very noticeable. It's immediate. It doesn't have to be complicated, although you wouldn't know that from listening to a lot of the things we talk about in dual subwoofer setup, but it doesn't have to be super complicated. It can actually make your life easier than even just a single sub for a single seat, which takes some effort and trial and error to get that to work. 2 subs just across the room from each other tends to work without a tremendous amount of trial and error, so it can make things easier. It definitely to make things better. Big difference going from 1 to 2. Going from 2 to 4, it does have advantages, particularly if you've got a very big seating area and you care about all the seats. That's the major advantage, or if you really want to dig into MSO. But the difference from 2 to 4 is not as big as the difference from 1 to 2. So that's where we land.
The way that you would notice that difference in 2 to 4 is if your seating area is large and then you're sitting in your normal seat, and then you move to another seat that is fairly far away, and you go, oh, it sounds terrible over here with just 2 subs, or it doesn't sound very good over here. It sounds weird over here with 2 subs, and then you get those other 4 subs, the other 2 subs, and you're like, oh, now everything sounds more basically the same. And that's what you're kind of going for. It's not that it doesn't make a difference. It's just that. Do you care? Do you care if it makes a difference?
A lot of times it's more theoretical and in the head than it is real life. And that's where our advice comes from.
Yeah. So the below 20 hertz stuff. Some movies do have some content down there. We can't hear it, but we can feel it, right? Is it really not worth worrying about?
I have a contention with the whole presumption that we can even feel it. I come back to the example of elephants, which have been around longer than we have, but people have been living in areas where there are elephants, and people had no idea that those elephants were making noises below the threshold of human audibility, and not quietly. They weren't just mumbling their, 13 hertz and stuff tones. They're bellowing them. It's part of why the elephants have the gigantic ears that they have, and their body size and the trunks and everything that resonate down at that frequency. It was then captured on recordings, the pitch adjusted, and it was discovered there's all this stuff there. It wasn't just that people didn't hear it. People had no idea they were making those sounds. None. No clue that anything was going on whatsoever. So this contention that we can feel it in our bones or in our jelly, I have some contention with that. We detect the harmonics. There's no question about that. If you've got a 13 hertz fundamental, it's the 26 hertz harmonic that we detect. So there's some argument to be made for, well, if you produce the fundamental, the harmonic is going to exist, but the harmonic is already in the recording. So do you even need the fundamental? I have a fair amount of contention with this desire to go below 20 hertz. I don't don't place any importance on it. I want 20 hertz response, and then I really don't care.
Well, okay, so I am generally in agreement. I have become very apathetic about sub 20 hertz performance. Like, I care that you get to 20 hertz, and I care you get there at the proper volume and in linear and everything else. And then anything that happens below there, I'm happy that it exists. I'm just not really caring all that much. Like, everything else that I care about in the subwoofer, which is hitting reference level down to 20 hertz in my space, you know, in the space provided, you know, fully pressurizing, that gets you almost certainly a couple of hertz below 20. Sure. just accidentally.
As a byproduct.
You know, it's sort of like when you're shopping for a receiver and people are like, well, you know, do I need to have pre-outs? It's like, well, what else do you need? Because by the time you figure out all the stuff you actually need, you might end up with a receiver that has pre-outs, or you might not. So let's just, you know, by the time you get down to 20 hertz, you're probably down to 19 or 18 or 17 if you corner load the thing. So I tend not to care. It's not that I don't think that it's important. And Rob's saying that he doesn't, and I'm not going to argue with him about it.
I don't buy that we're actually feeling it, because if you could count it, and we can't. So what's actually going on? You know, if you're beating at 10 beats per second, you would be able to count that as 10 beats per second without any difficulty. It wouldn't just be a rumble. You would count 10 beats per second, and the people who have these 10 hertz subs blasting at 120 dB, they're not counting 10 beats. They're feeling a rumble, which is the 20 hertz harmonic. So I contend that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe, you know, maybe at some crazy volume you'll be able to actually feel that, but like Rob said, the thing you're going to hear, the rumble that you're going to feel, is going to be the higher, and you're never going to actually feel that 10 hertz.
The one place where I have to contradict myself is you could end up with a wave interaction that creates beats, because just like infrared light is not visible, but we can see its interaction with visible light as heat waves, you could have the below 20 hertz stuff interacting with the audible range. Now, that's just gonna be distortion. It's not what the signal is actually supposed to do, but you might be able to genuinely detect it that way. So detection, yes, but desirable? I would argue no. So there.
So when you use multiple subwoofers, does that extend the bottom range? For example, if a single sub is rated to be minus 3 dB at, say, 16 hertz, does using all four of them in a room together get you down to maybe 13 hertz instead? And the answer is no. It does not do that.
No, not like that. I mean, whatever it is, when you add the second one, you're going to add 3 decibels to whatever it already had. So if it's minus 3 dB at 16 hertz, and then it's got a steep roll off and it's minus 24 at 13, 13 is still going to be 24 decibels quieter than, you know.
Right. It's just going to be 3 dB louder.
It's just going to be 3 dB louder than it was. Yeah. So it all just tracks like that. Yeah.
So if you'd have to look at the roll off. To know that, and you know. That's it doesn't give you any more extension.
No.
Not in the way that you're thinking.
Everything just gets 3 dB louder. That's all that happens.
Yes. So we talked about how ported subs often stay flat to a lower frequency than sealed subs, but then the ported subs roll off faster. So could 4 sealed subs actually extend lower and make him feel the infrasonic frequencies even better? Again, this is the same answer as the last one. You get more volume out of it, so that roll off that's happening, which is fairly steep, you know, the next, you know, hertz over, you know, is going to be maybe 3 or 6 or maybe more dB louder than it would have been. So maybe once you equalize everything and you cut all the frequencies down so that it's all, you might get 1 or 2 more hertz out of it, but I would say that's probably
there can be the graphs where you end up with it crossing over at a certain frequency, because if you got the shallower roll off versus the steeper roll off, but you add enough of the add 3 decibels, add 3 decibels, add 3 decibels, you can get those lines to cross at a certain frequency. But if it's below 20 hertz, like I've been saying, I don't really care.
So we've said to decouple subwoofers with some kind of pad underneath, and of course SVS sells their sound path isolation feet. Are the feet any better than a pad or vice versa? Any reason to use both a pad and the feet together? Once you've decoupled, you've decoupled. So decoupling means that any physical vibrations through the cabinet that would pass through the feet and into the structure of your home is damped by something squishy underneath. The sound path isolation feet are squishy. Pads, or whatever you're talking about, are also squishy. Putting two squishy things doesn't make it any more decoupled.
That's
it's
right.
just the same decoupled.
Yeah.
So once you've gotten to the decoupled state where the sound vibrations are not passing through the cabinet and into the structure of your home, it is as decoupled as it can be. It's 100% decoupled. You can't be more than 100% decoupled. So, does one work better than the other? I don't know what pad you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I mean, if it's like a Subdued or even just, getting the exercise pads, those types of things, make it enough that it doesn't compress all the way down. So, I mean, there can be the argument made that if you just have a flat bottom on the sub, no feet of any kind on the sub, and it's just the flat bottom of the sub interfacing with a pad instead of with the isolation feet, we are talking about pounds per square inch when it comes to what's going on there. So if you have many more square inches by virtue of just having a flat bottom on the sub without any feet to lessen the square inches that are interfacing with whatever it's standing on, then you have lessened the pounds per square inch. You could argue it that way. But as long as the decoupling is effective, it doesn't really matter. So I wouldn't say that a pad is more effective than the feet or vice versa. Go with whatever is less expensive and looks nicer in your opinion, and you don't have to do both.
Yes.
You definitely don't have to do both.
So that's the thing with the sound path isolation feet, is that they, in general, look more integrated into your subwoofer, and
but you can't slide your sub anymore. If you want to be able to slide your sub, you're not going to slide it on the isolation feet.
Yeah. He was planning to wait for another one of SVS's sales. Should he wait all the way until Black Friday? You don't have a house, my dude. You should wait until you have a house.
Definitely. And if you are going to do any construction on this room, wait until you've done
until
that.
after that. then you can wait for the next sale that comes up. Yeah, you have lots of waiting to do. Okay, you're in the waiting room. You're in the speaker subwoofer waiting room by your house. SVS has their outlet stores. None of the models he wants are in stock right now. Do they only refresh the outlet store when their sales? I have no idea.
No, that's just ongoing. The outlet store is just ongoing, so stuff goes.
It's just people return stuff and they want to, they can't sell it, or maybe they send it to a reviewer and the reviewer send it back or whatever.
But I will also say this regarding the sale thing. If you buy a sub from SVS and then it goes on sale next week, call them. Call them because they are very good on that, and they will. I won't promise that they'll give you the difference. No. I would be a bit surprised if they don't. I'll put it that way, because they're usually very good about that.
Because all you're going to do is, if you just bought it like a month ago and it's still within the return window, all you're going to say, well, I want to return it and buy one. Buy one from that's on sale.
Anything to do with pricing or exchanging or anything like that, call SVS. They're very, very good about that.
And yeah, I'm always surprised when I hear or see people like on Reddit say, "Oh, I'm having a problem with my SVS subwoofer. What should I do?" You should call them. I mean, I don't understand why you're even here.
Fair enough, though, because we've been trained by such bad service from other companies that it isn't our first thought. But SVS specifically, call them.
Call them. So Dale Lieutenant Sulu, so the other Dale or whatever. I don't even know how many Dales we have anymore. We explained field of view, and we recommended figuring out where you like to sit when you go to a movie theater to get an idea of the field of view that you personally prefer. But if you already own a display, how exactly do you go about figuring out how far away to sit? My dude, you get a chair, you sit in it, and then you move closer until you go, well, this is too close, and then you move back until you say, this is too far away, and then somewhere in between those two spots is where you like to sit.
That is definitely the practical answer, 100%.
So in my opinion, before Rob goes on and gets technical, in my opinion, I want to sit so close that the screen takes up as much of my vision as possible, without me having to move my eyes to see the majority of the stuff that's going on the screen. I don't mind having to move my eyes to see the corners.
Like to focus on something that's right on the edge. Yeah.
Yes. But the majority of the screen should be in focus and visible to my eye without me having to move them.
Sure.
Moving my eye is like surefire way to a migraine.
And I definitely never want to have to actually move my head. If I get to the point that it isn't within the range of moving my eyes comfortably, and I actually have to move my head to see, that's way too big in my But that's for me. Some people like it. Some people like the tennis match between two people talking. So that's for them. I was kind of happy that Dale asked this because it got me to look up, because there was the old viewing distance calculator, but it was really for HD TV. It's a little bit outdated. I mean, still useful, but it's a little bit outdated. So I found just through Googling, there's actually a TV Finder without an E for the finder, because it's got to be, searchable. But tvfinder.com, they actually have a really fun calculator where you can select in the tab either calculate the TV size based on the distance that you enter in the slider, or calculate the distance based on the TV size that you enter. And they've just got these little sliders. So I'm just showing some examples on YouTube where you can follow along in the Flickr album, but like setting it for the 65-inch TV that I know Dale has. If you're going for the 45-degree angle that I often talk about, they say that's a 5.58 feet. That's what you got to be eyes to screen, 5.58 feet from a 65-inch.
That's awfully close.
To get yourself a 45-degree viewing angle. And then I showed some of the SEMPTE recommendation 30-degree angle. You got to be 8.86 feet away. For 36 degrees, which is THX's recommendation, 7.22 feet. And then a 40-degree angle, which is kind of like what Fox recommends, or like what Artings recommends, 6.56 feet. So yeah, you can do all that. I also did this fun little thing, like going really big, 55-degree viewing angle, 4.59 feet away. That's like, you can't even stretch out. But then also, what if you set the distance that you want to be? I just did an example of that. So like going for the 45-degree field of view that I like, sitting approximately 12 feet away, that's when you need your 135-inch diagonal screen. So a great little calculator there. Then I also wanted to mention over at projectorscreen.com, they have a bunch of different screen calculators that are in there. The first one on that page, I'll have the links to these, of course. Very handy if you just want to quickly, I know the diagonal of my screen, what's its width? So instead of doing the little bit of Pythagorean theorem on your calculator to figure out the width based on the diagonal, you can just enter it in that little calculator and it'll spit the answer for you instantly. They have the borrowed projection calculator from Projector Central, so you can enter the model of projector that you have and set either your distance or your screen size, and it'll tell you your throw range for any projector that's in the database, which is massive. They're just borrowing that from Projector Central. They have the viewing distance calculator that is based on the old viewing distance calculator that was for HD TV, but it gives you some useful information in there. They have a Foot-Lambert calculator. Again, mostly this would definitely be for projectors, but if you want to figure out what your Foot-Lamberts are, instead of going through the math on a calculator, you can do that. And then they have a fun one, which is the screen size comparator. If you just want to see an overlay of one screen size versus another, here I put in an 83-inch like an OLED versus the upcoming 97-inch. If you want to just visualize how much bigger that 97-inch really is, and then it gives you some of the details in the boxes below, you can do that all over there at projectorscreen.com. So I like those two resources. I'll have the links for them, and they're very, very useful. I won't bother going through the notes of how to work it out on your calculator. You can figure out the trig for yourself.
There you go. Dale's having a problem with this HDMI ARC, or audio return channel, which is almost certainly CC related, but let's go on. He has his Sony A8F OLED connected to his Integra DRC R1.1 Pre-Pro.
What a name.
When he first turns... I know, right? It's a DRC. Well, there. When he first turns the TV and Pre-Pro on, a message pops up on the screen to say that the audio has been switched to external speakers, but then the screen will flash. Another pop-up will say the audio has been switched to TV speakers. Sometimes the screen will flash and the audio will keep switching back and forth on its own for a couple of minutes or more. Isn't that fun?
Isn't it, though?
It's an HDMI war.
Mm-hmm.
This happens when he's trying to use an external source, such as his Apple TV or DirecTV box. He went through troubleshooting with Sony support, and it seemed to be working for a short while, but it's back to this mess. And it was an embarrassment if he wants to have friends or family over for a movie, and it's an annoyance if he's watching alone. Any ideas? Don't use ARC would be my number one thing to say.
Well, I mean, that seems kind of viable in his case, because if you got an Apple TV, you don't have to use...
What are you using ARC for, other than getting, other than getting sound from the apps?
That's
and if
right.
you've got all the apps in your Apple TV, what possible benefit.
The only one I don't know is I can't remember if his particular Sony model is old enough that it would not have, what was it, Bravia Core, Sony's own streaming service, because that would only be available through the television itself. Maybe that's it. So our general recommendation is if you don't actually need an app that is only built into the TV and unavailable through your Apple TV, then just use the Apple TV and forget about using any of the built-in apps in the television, and let's just turn CEC and audio return channel off entirely.
I just wrote an article that was basically, when should you use ARC or eARC or ARC? And the answer is never if you can get away with it.
Right.
Like, never use it, because it is, you may have it working, and this is the absolutely infuriating part of HDMI is you could have it working for 6 months, no problems whatsoever, and all of a sudden, it's gone. It doesn't work anymore. And you're like, what happened? I didn't change anything. What happened? I don't know. None of us know. So you got an update to your Shield or your Apple TV or your TV or your actual TV. And now suddenly it changed a setting or added a setting or did something to HDMI that makes it not work anymore. I just don't use it.
But
just don't.
In the event that he does need to use the audio return channel for something, I'll go through what settings I could find in the manuals for these things. In your Integra, you press the cog wheel on the remote that brings up your settings. You go to the hardware section, HDMI within hardware, and then HDMI CEC. In the manual, it does say HDMI CEC in the case of your Integra does need to be on in order for the audio return channel to function. Then make sure the audio return channel is on, because that is a separate setting, but only available if HDMI CEC in general is first turned on. There is another setting that I'm not familiar with in your Integra, which is called Audio TV Out. And some AV receivers have the ability to output whatever sound is going through the receiver to the television, as opposed to outputting it from, your surround sound system that's in there. Make sure it's only set to output to your surround sound system and never trying to send the audio from your sources that are plugged into your Integra to the television, because that could be tripping something up, and the default setting is auto. So if you can, set that to play everything out of the Integra and never send anything to the television. But I'm not certain 100% on those settings because I don't have that particular AV receiver to do in person. In your Sony TV, you're going to press the home button on your remote, go to the settings, go to the TV section, go to the sound. Make sure the speakers are set to external, not auto. So that might be the thing that gets this working. And then set the audio system prioritization to Bravia Sync, because that's their name for HDMI CEC. Turn your system sounds off, because the system sounds want to come out of the TV speakers, and if you have system sounds left on, it will not let you set the speakers to external. It will not let you turn the TV speakers off. So you have to turn the system sounds off, and I'll bet Sony support didn't tell you that little tidbit. If you also press the home button, go to the settings and go to the external inputs, that's where you'll find your Bravia Sync settings. Bravia Sync control must be on. That's HDMI CEC and Sony's name for it. Turn the device auto power off and the TV auto power on off. Turn those things off. Don't have the power part of things going on, because that can mess things up. Then always turn your Integra receiver on as the first device and let it boot up. Then turn on your source device second, and last turn your TV on, because then it should detect everything upstream from the television and know that it needs to output its sound externally. If needed, while you're playing something, you can press the action menu, because of course there's both a home and an action menu button on the Sony remote. While something is playing, you can press the action menu button, go to the speakers section, to the audio system, and set your speakers to external if you need to manually. That should be everything you need. I'm betting dollars to donuts it was the darn system sounds that are messing things up.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yep.
That definitely sounds right. Oh, I have to scroll. Bertrand in Quebec. Last week, Bertrand asked if there was a way to use a different pair of binding posts on this old Sony DH820 receiver, since he just uses it for stereo pair of receivers connected to his TV. But one of his front channels is cutting out, and the receiver has gone into protection mode sometimes. So we detailed how they use a surround back binding post instead as speaker B. But after some trials with his 5M Audio LX4 speakers, he discovered that there's really only one channel of his Sony receiver that still works. My dude, it might be time to upgrade.
That one's getting there, yeah.
Yeah. All the other channels have problems, and this is after he removed the top of the case and cleaned everything like we suggested. Plus, he used brand new speaker cable. So, as long as it's not going through, I don't know. So now what? He really doesn't want to buy a whole new receiver for this TV setup. I hate to break it to you. That seems to be where you're at. But this seems like a bigger problem than just dust or a stray speaker wire, right?
It does now.
Any idea of what a repair would cost? Almost certainly more than the receiver itself.
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
To be fair, this sounds a lot like when I had a problem with my ATI amplifier of all things, and they were more upset about it than I was because they're like, our amps don't do this. But my one of the two gigantic toroidal power transformers inside of my ATI, one of them like somehow became misaligned, like misseated in there, and it was causing noises out of all 7 channels. And this sounds like, because it's affecting like everything, I wonder if it's like a power supply thing, or it could even be like a capacitor
This
thing.
is way past my area of expertise.
Yeah, like
when it comes to actual electrical work is not.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, this would be either a repair or replace. This, I think you've done your due diligence. You know, it's like everything's going wrong in this thing. Cleaning it didn't help. Replacing speaker wire didn't help. So I do think you're into repair or replace territory. I don't actually have any idea what a repair would cost, but since like trying to keep the price as low as possible, I don't really see a way to get away with this with $0 spent. I just don't see a way to do that. What you could do, since all you want to do is a pair of speakers in here, is you could go for like a Fosse amplifier that has an optical input, because his TV, as far as I know, has optical out. I didn't actually spot just an analog audio out on the TV that he mentioned in his email. I did see an optical output. So like Fosse's DA2120, that has an optical input. It also has a dedicated subwoofer output in case you ever want to add one in the future. This would also give you the ability to play Bluetooth sources on this as well. In Canada, that's going for $180, which is less expensive than like even your most basic 5-channel AV receiver. That's going to be like $250, $260. So this is at least a little bit less expensive than that. There is Fosse's 2120A rather than the 2120C. The 2120A is only $143 in Canada, but it's only 25 watts a channel. It is kind of low power, whereas the 2120C is a solid 60 watts per channel and should have no problem driving any speakers for television purposes. So to me, the 2120 is a little bit iffy. I know we say don't care about wattage too much, but now we're talking about like a full 5 decibels of clean power from the 2120C versus the 2120A, and that's a significant amount of extra headroom for less than $40. So that is my only concern. The only time I've heard people complain about the Fosse amps is when it is discovered through questioning that they are, powering their bookshelf speakers or whatever they are with them, and then trying to blast them, basically. And so if you're playing these at a reasonable volume and you're not too far away, go for it. If you are like, well, sometimes I like to do housework and I turn my system up and, I play it real loud so I can hear it over the vacuum cleaner, this is not the amp for you. This is not what you want. These two models do come with a remote control, so that's another important thing if you're going to be using it for TV.
Mike is a new listener. He's had a keen interest in home theater since he was a teenager, but only recently was finally able to put together a fully dedicated room. More than that, reaching out to us is the first interaction he's ever had online to talk about home theater. But don't worry, he can handle Tom's sarcasm. They all say that, and then they get all butthurt.
Well, aren't we flattered? Isn't it so nice to be the first? We're your first. We'll be gentle.
Tom
makes no promises.
I make no promises about any of that. Rob may be the one who's caressing you and stroking your head, but I will be the one who's saying you shouldn't have done those shots, boy.
I bet Tom's going to say something about his choice of screen size. It's my prediction.
So he saved up for years and watched lots of YouTube videos. He's proud of what he's built and is happy with what he hears and sees. Dude, why are you talking to us? But he doesn't consider himself an expert, so he's reaching out with a few questions. His room is 13 by 21 long. 13 wide by 21 long, and with a sloped drop tile ceiling that's 7 feet high at the front of the room and 8.5 at the back of the room. He's running a 9.2.4 configuration using all monoprice monolith in-wall speakers, 3 of the THX LCR 3-way models up front behind acoustically transparent screen, the THX 365 3-way in-walls everywhere else, even in the ceiling. The 2 subs are 12-inch Klipsch Synergy Black Label sub 120 in the front 2 corners. That's already a problem. And it's all handled by a Denon X6700H with some additional Emotiva amplification. On the video side, he's installed a massive 165-inch acoustically transparent screen from Silver Ticket that basically takes up the entire front wall because he was on Reddit and they said that was a good idea.
Yep, go as big as you can. That's as big as you could.
At the back of the room, he's installed 2 projectors, a JVC NX7 for critical viewing, plus an LG HU810 laser DLP for everything else so that he can save the bulb on his JVC. I wonder how many bulbs you could have bought for the price of that LG. I don't know how much.
If it's the entire bulb plus casing, approximately 3 or 4.
Okay, maybe. He's built 2 risers, both stuffed full of insulation, so he can have 3 rows of tiered seating, all recliners, 3 on the floor up front, 4 seats on the middle riser, and 3 more seats right at the back on a second riser. So that must be on the back wall, I guess.
Pretty darn close. Yeah, it's just enough room for the projectors to be just behind the head of the middle seat there, but pretty close to the back wall for those last 3 seats.
So the HVAC registers were originally on the floor at the back of the room. He just extended those so that they blow air into the room through the top of the riser at the back. His primary source is NVIDIA Shield, which he uses for streaming services and for playing back his large Plex library from a Synology NAS, network accessible storage drive thing. All right, looking at pictures, yes. That back row, not tall people are allowed to be back there.
Definitely not. Yeah, I think you got a hunch to get in there.
I know. I think it's...
And you definitely cannot get up and walk across when the movie is playing, because that's going to cast a shadow, for sure.
If there's one part of his audio system where he feels like he still has much to learn, it's the bass and subwoofers. Well, you should have learned not to put them both at the front of the room, but you didn't. So here we're going to teach you. He initially thought they were just for the 0.1, and he didn't place a lot of importance on them. Then he got his Denon X6700H and initially plugged his 2 Klipsch Synergy subs into the 2 subwoofer outputs, ran Odyssey, and called it a day. Now that he's armed with more knowledge, he switched to using a single subwoofer output with a Y splitter and wants a big subwoofer upgrade. So first up, what does it actually mean to pressurize a room? And since he doesn't really know what he's missing, will we say a subwoofer upgrade would be worthwhile in his case? Okay, so there are Klipsch subwoofers that we recommend. I don't think these are them.
Not quite, yeah.
Remember.
Now, these are not bad, okay? The Synergy Black Label, what they basically did was take the bigger box size of some of their other subs and then put the Synergy 12-inch driver and amp in there. Now, what you're going to be getting with those, it's actually hard to find the specs on these online now because it's not a current model anymore, but you're going to get minus 3 dB at about 28 hertz. That's what you're looking at with this model. Now, output-wise, and for that extension, and for the price that they were charging, which is really very affordable, I have no beef with that. Like, this is not a sub where if somebody bought it, I go, oh, you got ripped off. Far from it. These were a pretty good value. But in the type of theater that you put together, which is darn nice looking, man. Like, that's really nice. Obviously spent some coin on it. Definitely spent some coin on the projector. You know, really plan this out. Is there an upgrade to be had? Yes. Just flat out, yes, there's an upgrade to be had. What are we talking about when we say pressurizing a room? Well, we're really just talking about hitting full reference volume all the way down to 20 hertz. And keep in mind that full reference volume allows for 20 hertz to be 115 in peaks. It should hit at least 110. If we're talking about what is reference volume, it is at least 110 decibels in the bass, possibly as much as 115. It's 105 decibel peaks from any of your speakers, but in the bass, it could be as much as 115. It should be capable of at least 110. So, are you getting that right now with your Synergy pair of subs? No. Just flat out at 20 hertz, no, you're not. Could an upgrade get you there? Yes, it could. So that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. So so better, bigger subs, or it already looks like he has put one in the back of the room.
That is some kind of like thing next to the couch.
What is that?
I don't know.
It's not a sub?
No, because it looks soft. It's not a sub back there.
Well, I can't see it, apparently.
I think it's some kind of ottoman or like a chest. Or...
So you kind of hosed yourself here in this whole screen situation.
Well,
not that
I was going to ask about that, but
yeah. But yes, is there? So the question that has been asked has been answered, which is pressurizing a room is hitting. In order for bass in a room to hit a volume, it needs to bounce around the room a whole bunch because that's the bass waves are so long. Okay, so when we talk about pressurizing a room, we're saying in that room you can hit a volume, and this volume that we're talking about is reference volume, which is, like Rob said, 115 dB peaks, at least 110.
Yeah,
and these subs might do that, but they're not doing it down to 20 hertz because they can't play that low. So you need something that can play that low. In this room, your room is not super big.
But it's not tiny either.
It's not tiny. And you've hamstrung yourself in how large of a sub that you can have because you're going to start covering that screen. Now, I'm not
these
insulting
ones already,
you.
a little bit, we can see there's going to be a little bit of a shadow cast from the corners there,
So I'm going to... Okay, I don't know what's coming up here.
Yeah.
So
we're getting into this stuff. Yet? Yeah, we will be.
So he's seen an example of 4 subwoofers, one in each corner. Do all 4 subs also need to be at the same height in order for the layout to work as intended? Not really. I don't really think the subwoofers care how high they are.
Yeah, I mean, if you just went strictly by math, there is some difference that happens in the wave pattern. But given small room acoustics where all of the really deep bass sound waves are bouncing more than once before the wave has even fully formed, effectively the height makes no difference because you're going to have multiple bounces of any of the deep bass sound waves between your floor and ceiling. You're going to have multiple bounces no matter what you do. We aren't in an auditorium where the ceiling is, 40 feet above us and the height could actually make some kind of difference in the wave pattern. Here, mathematically speaking, strictly speaking, there is a difference that exists, but effectively there isn't. So I'm not worried about what height your subwoofers are in a typical home room.
Right. I'm very much looking at pictures right now. He was thinking he might like to stick with Monoprice Monolith and having everything in wall. Monoprice introduced their Monolith in wall subwoofers with either 2 8-inch drivers, which is the MIW sub 8, because Monoprice loves me and they love to name things that make sense.
Does make sense.
M for Monoprice, IW for in wall, sub because it's a sub, and 8 because it has an 8-inch driver in it.
We can figure out where those letters and numbers came from.
And then the MIW sub 8.2, which has 2 8-inch drivers in it, is $550 each. Thank you, Monoprice. You're my favorite. As we can see in his photos with his Klipsch Synergy subs, about 18 inches tall, obscure a tiny bit of the bottom corners of his screen. So if the subs were in wall and behind the screen, that would fix the issue. His front, left, and right speakers are already installed close to the front corners, so in-wall subs would go in the wall stud bays inside of those, and he could match that on the back wall if you went with a single 8-inch woofer models and put them in the same stud bay as the surround back speakers. He also knows how much Tom dislikes surround back, so maybe he replaced the surround backs with 2 of the 8-inch subs. I actually was looking at this, and I'm like, anybody who's sitting in that back row, it sucks.
I mean, that is a highly compromised experience if you're sitting in any of the 3 rear seats.
Yeah. The rest of it, I'm okay with.
I would argue to keep the surround backs in this setup because the majority of the time you certainly are not sitting in the very back row. That is overflow seating. I would keep the surround backs. But yeah, we should dig into the whole, should he go with in-wall subwoofers? If so, should he go with the Monoprice Monolith 8-inch or dual 8-inch in-wall subs? I'm going to argue no to these 8-inch in-wall subs. If we look up what the frequency response is, there's nothing shocking about this frequency response that's coming out of them, but 8-inch subwoofers without any sort of cabinet other than the wall cavity behind them, because these are not sealed enclosures. They're just firing into the wall cavity. And to create the internal volume that you would need to have the box, it's going to be the whole wall cavity anyway, so you're not really putting any kind of backer box on these other than maybe reinforcing the wall a little bit. But the response that we get out of this, I mean, it's a very peaked, sloped response, and it's a very noticeable drop by the time you get down to 20 hertz. We're talking 15 decibels difference.
Yeah, from they're rated only down to 36.
That's right. And I mean, Monoprice is super conservative and honest in their ratings. So they're saying, what is our maximum output? Just playing normally, we go 3 decibels lower than that and call that the average, and then 3 decibels below that. So it's 6 decibels below the peak, basically, is where they rate their -3. And yeah, it's like 35 hertz. And like I say, it's like 15 decibels quieter by the time you get down to 20. Now, if we say pop over to SVS's 3000 micro, they're a bit more forgiving in their own specs, saying that the -3 dB point is 23 hertz. It really isn't. Their own graph indicates that the roll-off of this dual 8-inch subwoofer, the 3000 micro, with a sealed enclosure, which is essentially what you'd be getting similarly, except a little bit less powerful with the Monoprices, where it's a similar type of roll-off. It's more like -10, to be fair, at 20 hertz with that 3000 micro. It isn't really a 20 hertz sub. So I'm like, you've got physical limitations because of that screen. Yeah. I do think going with sealed subs makes sense in here, but you're gonna kind of need to go big with your sealed subs. Now, if
big sealed.
If we look at now, which one did I pull up here? Because I think this is just the 2000 Pro.
2000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the 2000 Pro. The 2000 Pro from SVS doesn't have the typical roll-off that a sealed sub would. They're using their DSP to boost the output down low. But here, I mean, it really is -3 at 20 hertz. That's true in the 2000 Pro. If you went even one step up, in your case, like if you're just going to do a pair in this room, if you went to, say, the SB3000s, you'd be in really good stead. And those are only about 15 inches tall. So given that your current clip subs, which are about 18 inches tall, are just like an inch or two into your screen, if you lowered the height of the physical height of the sub by 3 inches, it should just clear the bottom of your screen. And if you went with like SB3000s, you'd be in really good shape here. So because what you're looking for is not just a visual upgrade, you're looking for a performance upgrade. I don't really feel like you're truly getting your money's worth with those in-wall subs. Don't forget, they're passive. They each need an amplifier, and the amplifier Monoprice sells for them is $280 as well. So when you're talking $550 plus $280, you're getting pretty close to the price of the SB2000 Pros. The SB2000 Pros, if you got 4 of the SB2000 Pros, I think you're fine. I don't think you have any problems in terms of output. If you wanted to go with just 2 subs, I think you would step up to SB3000s. So price for price, you're very similar territory, and performance-wise, you're getting more with the SVS sealed subs.
So what about going cylinder and either moving it into the room so that it's not in the line of sight on that front? Like I was looking at the front right wall so that it would be between, well, under that speaker, basically, that's there.
Okay.
And then on the back left, it would probably be blocking the walkway, but who gives a crap? Next to the red couch or next to, in that same vicinity. I can't tell the depth here from this picture.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's squishy enough that I would need to build the model, or at the very least use the augmented reality, because I'm not confident just from the photos that even the cylinder subs are going to be an easy fit.
Well, he could lie the one down in the front, but it's going to look so strange.
At 16.5 inches diameter, though, it's getting pretty close to the bottom of that screen. I think you need to be in the 14, 15-inch height for that to
I don't know. He'd have to
fit.
tell us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be shorter than what he's currently got. So,
yeah, but like literally only an inch and a half. I don't know if that's quite enough. To
I
lay
thought
down
it was
a
18 inches. I thought that sub was 18 inches
They
tall.
are, and the cylinders are 16.5 inches diameter.
Oh, 16.5.
So even lying down, it's an inch and a half difference.
Yeah, I don't know. So that's another possible option.
But that one you've got to AR or calculate very carefully.
Yeah, because if you move it into the room some, and then basically move it into the room from the back of the room, but on the opposite wall, an equal amount. So wherever you can put it on the on that riser back there, mirror how far from the back wall that is to how far is the front wall. I don't know if it's going to allow you to if it's going to block the sight lines at all.
Right.
I personally wouldn't worry about getting 4 subs. Not worry, but I don't know that I would go with 4 subs in here, because I think the 2 subs are going to give you enough even bass response across the seats that you care about, because that back row is hosed.
Yeah. Let's
4
forget
subs
about
is
the
not
back
even
row.
fixed.
But he's still got 7 seats that he probably does care about. Like
that's a lot.
I'm on the fence here. I'm like to me the 4 subs in this room is not out of the question. And like four,
I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah, 4 SB2000 Pros is like within the price range he was considering anyway, and I think the performance would be really, really good. So I'm kind of leaning to 4 SB2000 Pros.
Where am I here? I gotta scroll.
Yeah.
He's curious about bass shakers. There's a $475 package that includes 4 Aura Pro bass shakers along with the Dayton amp to power them. He's aware they might be a gimmick, but he would only install them in the 4 middle row, which is obviously now we know where he sits. Middle row seats, and use them for the over-the-top experiences. He's heard Rob saying how he'd only ever use a butt kicker LFE if you were going to go for a tactile transducer, but if you're just looking for a bit of fun and won't even use them all the time, could the Aura Pro and Dayton package be all right? I mean, I cannot express to you how little value I put in butt kickers, especially if you're going to upgrade your system, your subwoofer, so that you are hitting full reference volume. Your couch is gonna be shaking,
I would
and it doesn't
certainly try things with your subs first before you also do this.
Yeah,
but if you do it, I would say, why go halfway? Why not get the good one? Because you already have risers. So you could get a single butt kicker LFE. You don't attach it directly to the seat. You attach it to the riser because you already got a riser. So you attach the butt kicker LFE to the riser, power that thing. Now, granted, to get a single butt kicker LFE plus the amplifier to power it. The amplifier is ideal for powering 2, so if you do ever want to add a second one, you could. It can technically power up to 4 butt kicker LFEs, but it's not going to really quite give them all the power they can handle. It's ideal for powering 2, but that amplifier is $600. But we basically doubled the price of what you're talking about, but you're getting the way better experience. So do things with just the subwoofers first before you also invest in tactile transducers. But I say, if you do end up going for tactile transducers, get the good one. Do it whole hog. It is double the price, but that's the only advice I can feel comfortable saying.
And I would wait. Chances are your subwoofers, especially if you put one on top of this riser.
That's true.
Everything's going to be shaken anyways. I really don't think that you should buy anything until you upgrade your subwoofers, integrate them, and get them going. Yeah. Plus, I'm telling you, it is more trouble than it's worth. Would he be able to use a second subwoofer pre-out on his Denon X6700? H, to send an uneq'd signal to the bass shakers. He's under the impression that the two subwoofer outputs are truly independent and not just an internal Y splitter. The answer is, in theory, yes. In practice, no.
No, yeah. Unfortunately, they don't have independent EQ.
Yes,
and that's what you need.
Both get the same
yeah,
EQ.
the two subwoofer outputs on your Denon X6700H, they provide independent levels and independent distances. But the EQ is applied equally to both subwoofer outputs on the Denons. And what you need is individual EQ.
What I would like receiver manufacturers to add, if they could, would be for these dual independent subwoofer outputs, for there to be a setting within the base menu that says, mono, dual mono, independent, and have one be uneq'd.
Right.
Have just a flat, for
just send it out there. Don't touch it.
Or like a bass shaker or an some sort of tactile transducer.
I'm pretty sure the new
output.
Anthem AVM 90 Pre-Pro can do that with its 4 subwoofer outputs.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it can do that.
I'm hoping that will be the case going, as we go forward, because the way they're doing it right now, it really kind of sucks.
Right.
But that's not the way it is.
No, the issue here is if you told the Denon in your setup that you have 2 subwoofers, because you're thinking, okay, one of the signals is going to actually go to my subs that are producing sound, and the other one is going to go to my tactile transducer. If you do that, you're not even going to be able to run the Odyssey program, because when it tries to send the signal to the second subwoofer output, the microphone isn't going to detect anything because your tactile transducers are the only things that are going to be moving in response to that signal, and the microphone isn't going to pick it up. So unfortunately, it isn't this simple. You'd still need to have like a mini DSP, which you're going to use to undo what Odyssey does to the subwoofer output so that you can send it's been corrected by Odyssey, but then inverted and decorrected by the mini DSP, so you can send a flat signal to your tactile transducer.
Yeah. So when it comes to acoustic room treatments, his drop tile ceiling is acoustic ceiling tiles, and that's about it. The carpet is thin. 3 of the 4 walls have insulation inside them, and the risers have insulation stuff inside. Does that count at all? No.
Inside the walls, inside the risers does not count for acoustic treatment at all. It's still very good to have. It helps with your soundproofing, but it does not count as acoustic treatment inside the room.
He's thinking he needs to add panels to his walls. Yeah, you are correct. He'd go DIY, and the thickness would need to be limited to just regular bats of insulation that are meant to go inside 2x4 walls. He's tried to install front wide and surround speakers as symmetrically as possible, just firing straight across the room at each other, but he didn't move any existing wall studs so they aren't perfectly lined up. He's wondering if he made any big mistakes with his speaker placement. Well, okay.
One.
And then he's wondering what would be the best layout for panels. With 3 rows of seats and front wide speakers installed in the sidewalls, you really can't see how specific sidewall reflections can be addressed. So where should his panels go? How many? And how should any speakers be moved? So Rob is of the opinion, and said this many times on this podcast, that your front right speaker should be pointed directly at your face.
Front wide speakers, yes. Yeah.
So those wide speakers that you have firing directly into the room from the sides, he is not going to be a fan of. I am of the opinion that front wide speakers are for suckers, generally speaking. Now, I do understand what their benefit is supposed to be. I have never experienced front wide speakers and thought to myself, boy, I got to get me some of that. So generally, I feel the same way about Atmos, so you can take my opinion with a grain of salt if you don't like it. That said, you have what you have. You have the ability to turn off your front wide speakers and then turn them back on and test things out and see how they sound to you.
Yep.
Are they making a difference? Is that difference beneficial? I don't know. It's your room. I don't think that having slightly mismatched speaker placement is an issue.
I'm not worried about that. Nah.
on Reddit and every place else, you will see people who will just absolutely roast people for having speakers.
You gotta live in the real world, man. He wasn't gonna move studs, and I'm with you. I wouldn't move studs either.
1 inch off from the other one. They're like,
yeah, these are not worlds apart in any way whatsoever. No, my only critique would be, the front wides just being parallel, flush on the walls. That to me is not ideal. Height wise, they seem a little bit high. They're probably fine for that middle row, but if you're in the front row, the front wides are a bit high, but I think he sits primarily in the middle row, so that's fine for that. Getting those in a way that they're angled, like toed at the seats for front wides, that's going to be a challenge within walls. So, I in this instance, I kind of might end up being on Tom's side where maybe I just don't even use those front wides. But you've got them. You can experiment with them. The X6700H lets you do two completely separate configurations and switch between them, A/B compare them. So you could utilize some of that. That's my only criticism there. For acoustic treatment, happily you have those acoustic ceiling tiles. That's a big deal because it's probably made it so at least this room doesn't echo the way that it is.
Right.
And you've got enough seats in here too that they are doing some amount of at least scattering. They look like mostly leather, so they're not really plush and absorptive, but you don't just have like completely unbroken up hard flat surfaces everywhere. That ceiling is definitely a help. I would put you don't really have much of a place to put panels on the back wall. Like they'd be behind the seats where they're not really going to be doing much, but you do have the rear corners. You can definitely do something in the rear corners. You can't really do anything in the front corners because your screen is just there. But you could definitely do the back corners. That would be where I would start 100%. That'd be the first thing I would do, is get as thick as you possibly can in those rear corners. And then I would basically just put panels along the side walls, however you feel. However you feel. Whatever looks good to you, feels good to you. I'm not super concerned about precise placement on the side walls at all.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I would take, in this room in particular, because of how the height limitations you have going on here, 2 foot by 4 foot panels of whatever thickness you
and that's
choose.
What you're just going to buy bats. So they're just going to be, get the 24-inch on center bats of insulation. They're going to be 3.5 inches thick, and that's exactly what you use. Don't cut them at all.
Yeah. In my room, what I did is I took the Owens Corning or Rockwool or whatever the heck it was I had. I don't remember anymore. It's been so many years. And it was 2 feet by 4 feet. I cut it in half. And I made 2 foot by 2 foot. They're a little bit bigger than that because of the frame. But 2 foot by 2 foot pieces of insulation. I put a frame around it. And now I have these squares, right? And you can hang them as squares or as diamonds. And they're very easy to move around. You don't like where they are? Move them. I move them all the time. I just get those, I don't know what they're called, but they look like a J, basically, and you stick them through your wall, and then you turn them, and there's a little hook thing, and you hang pictures on them. It's perfect. They leave almost no mark on your wall, and you can just keep moving them around.
Right.
If I were you, that's what I would do. I would build 2 foot by 2 foot, or ish. I would build little squares, and then I would just kind of put them everywhere I could. And like Rob said, behind the couches, they're not going to do a lot. They'll do something. They're not going to do nothing. So you could put some there if you wanted to. But yes, along the side walls. And if you have not put insulation above those ceiling tiles, you should do that as well, because that turns your ceiling into a base trap.
Cheapest stuff you can put above that drop tile ceiling.
Literally, find it on sale.
The super cheap, white, crappy, falls apart in your hand stuff that they put above garages. That's what you want above your drop tile ceiling. But acoustically, it works just fine.
Yeah. So he's got his X6700H with 11 channels of amplification. Then he's got 2 Emotiva Bass Axe A5 5-channel amps. He's using 13 speakers. He figured the Emotiva amplification must be better, so he used all 10 channels of those. And then 3 or 4 of his overhead speakers are powered by the Denon. Was that the correct way to go about connecting all of his speakers? I mean, it's not wrong.
It's fine. To me, it feels a bit weird to have one of the overhead speakers powered by the Emotiva and the other 3 powered by the Denon, but it's not going to harm anything.
I don't think there's any way you're ever going to convince me that you needed all this amplification in this room.
Those mono-price speakers are 4-ohm rated and not the easiest of.
You could convince me of the front 3. Sure. The front 3 you could convince me of. He is sitting within arm's reach of almost every other speaker in this room. There is no world in which that Denon 6700H can't power the rest of those speakers. If it were me, I would sell one of those Emotivas, and I would use the 5 channels from what you have, the front 3, and then pick 2.
Yeah.
I don't know. It could be any of them.
I mean, I'd go for whatever's farthest away.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe surround back, because those are probably the ones that are farthest away from you, and then use the
Denon to power everything else.
Denon to power everything else.
Yep.
That's what I would do. Help offset the cost of some of these subwoofers that you're going to do. But the way that you've connected it, other than the fact that, I mean, it really doesn't matter.
No, it'll be fine.
To me, it wouldn't
even be worth the hassle of rewiring and reconfiguring. No. I'm perfectly fine leaving it the way you've got it.
I think that if you do what I just said, or if you were just to like power everything through the Denon, I think chances are you'd be like, it kind of sounds exactly the same to me. I kind of think it sounds the same. I think that that's what would happen. But you have 2 amps there. I would keep one of them. I would sell the other one, and then go on with your life. All right, he says he's got 2 different projectors. He was concerned about replacement bulb cost for the JVC, but then he saw that the expensive $600 or more replacements include both the bulb and the housing, but it's possible to buy just the bare bulb for a lot less money. So do we have any recommendations? Is it okay to buy the bare bulb, and if so, from where? All right, so what I do is I go to Projector Central, I think it is, right? .com, and look at their recommended vendors.
They just have a link that says buy a lamp. You just look up whatever model of projector you have, and then there'll be a link in the description for that projector on Projector Central that says buy a lamp.
Yeah. So I do that, and then they usually have more than one place. I go to all the different places. I see which one's the cheapest and kind of do a little comparison shopping. It probably take you about 20 minutes to get the whole thing done, and then you'll order a lamp from there. Can you buy just the lamp? As somebody who has done that, and not on purpose, by the way, did not know that's what I was getting. I thought I was getting the whole thing, but I just got the lamp. It is certainly possible.
Yes.
Okay. The number one thing to be careful about is that you cannot touch the bulb with your bare hands.
Absolutely not. And clean gloves. Not something you've used for something else. Clean, brand new gloves.
You have to be extremely careful. Any grease or oils off your skin that get onto that bulb will create a hot spot, and that bulb will explode. It will probably be violent, and it'll probably be quick, and you will cry a lot. So I don't know with this projector and this housing and everything, how complicated it is. I will know that when I got it for whatever projector I was using, I can't even remember anymore, it was doable. It was not impossible. So can you do that to save some money? Absolutely. Should you? I would say with qualification, sure.
You just have to be careful.
Amount of money.
Yeah. If you get the one that comes with the housing, it's dead simple. It's just you pull the old one out, you put the new one in. So if that's what you want, that's what you're paying the extra hundreds of dollars for.
Has done it before. As somebody who has done it before, I always buy the housing. It's like 2 screws, and you're done. Yeah. You know, it's so dead simple. It's 5 minutes. It takes me longer to get the projector off of the shelf at the back of my room than it does to switch out the bulb. So, yeah, I don't know what the savings is. Is it $300? Is that the savings? Because in which case, in that case, I would say I would definitely consider it. But by the time you need one of these bulbs, you may be in a different place financially, and you just like, I don't know, it's not worth it.
In addition to being careful with handling of the bare bulb, you also do need to be careful in the dismantling of the housing, because they are usually held together by plastic clips in places.
Yeah.
And yes, you can snap one of those clips. So it's being careful, taking your time, being very methodical. It absolutely can be done, and it can save you hundreds of dollars. So right now, all of the JVC bulbs for the NX series are on back order, because I think a bunch of people panicked when the laser models came out and the bulb models got discontinued, and I think a bunch of people bought up what bulbs were in circulation. They are on back order. There are supposed to be more arriving throughout the summer. I would advise, because right now if you just click on the links that you'll find through Projector Central, like we talked about, none of them have any stock, so you can't really order it that way. I would advise calling avscience.com. They are probably the top JVC dealer, and they will be able to help you out in either instance. You might not be able to get it today, but you will be on their list, and you can get either one from them. So I would talk to them.
Okay. Could he somehow use both of his projectors at the same time to make a better, brighter image? For the love of God, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah, you got the JVC for its black levels and contrast. This is an instance of weakest link. All right, because light can only add to light. The deeper black levels of the JVC cannot make the black levels of your LG deeper. You can only add, like, the blacks of the JVC are not pure black. There's a little bit of light. So that little bit of light from the JVC gets added to the light of the LG, and the black levels are even lighter than the LG's black levels. It is not a pigment where it gets darker and darker the more you add together. It's the opposite. Light adds to light. So you'd only be destroying your black levels in contrast. It would be brighter. It is technically possible, but
trying to get those things aligned.
Well,
though,
the latency, I don't believe that the latency between the two projectors is identical, so you would have the images refreshing at slightly different times, in addition to just trying to get the pixels aligned. So to me, this is a
Are they both 4K projectors too?
They are both 4K.
Okay, so I mean, if there was a difference in their resolution, then you would default to the lowest resolution.
Yeah, but like the JVC is the 4096 by 2160, so its pixels are not necessarily like the same pixel pitch as the LG. Yeah. Like, I'm talking about the tiny little gap between pixels, not necessarily the same. So getting the pixels aligned, getting the latency aligned, and then you're just destroying the black levels in contrast of the JVC. This is a no. Is it theoretically possible in some world? Perhaps, but don't even bother going down that path. You don't want to do that.
Lastly, he asked, should he get in touch with DJ to do a Takeover Tuesday on Brightside Home Theater Podcast? Like he said, he's never talked to anybody online about home theater before. What is Takeover Tuesday? I've never... And who is this DJ?
Yes, that's right. Yes. DJ with his Brightside Home Theater Podcast. He does 2 episodes a week. On Fridays, he breaks down a movie. On Tuesday, he has guests on who are just members of the home theater community. And I would say absolutely. Go ahead and get in touch with DJ. You will have fun for sure. It is easy as long as you have some kind of microphone that you can connect to your computer and speak into. He takes care of everything else on his end. So absolutely have a chat with DJ. I'm certain you'll have fun doing that. So,
sure.
Yeah, so...
Who do we have left?
Okay, we're going to stop there. So Bill and Infinite Gary are on the list. Bill has many questions, quite at length. Infinite Gary's were super short. I was thinking we might sneak those in there, but we're past 2 hours, so we won't. And Bill and Infinite Gary are on the list.
I have to pee very badly.
That's also true.
We are ending this podcast because I've drunk a considerable amount of liquid during this. Two LaCroix, a big iced coffee, and however many ounces this Yoda cup is are now inside my body and would like to come out. So if you want to get your question answered on our AV podcast, where we answer your home theater and AV questions, just send them to question@avrant.com. I want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Kevin, Michael, Bill, and Aris for going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and giving us a PayPal donation, as well as our 139 patrons over at patreon.com, including Bertrand and Daniel. So thank you, all of you.
Yes, indeed. Kevin, Michael, Bill, Aris, thank you very much for the PayPal donations. Bertrand and Daniel, thank you for being 2 of our 139 patrons over at patreon.com/avrant podcast. That's the place to go to make an automatic monthly donation. Thank you all for the financial support.
We want to thank Bertrand for letting us know that our question@avrant.com email was all messed up, and for Clint for fixing it, Dale for talking us up to Audimute, or whatever the heck that company's name is, Infinite Gary for mentioning us to Rhythmic, and Dale, Lieutenant Sulu, for mentioning us to the people at Sherwin-Williams, who are probably very confused right now, but hey, maybe they'll listen.
You never know.
And Dale, Mike, and Bill for sending me photos to use on AV Gadgets.
I'll just quickly say the names again. Bertrand, Dale P, Infinite Gary, Dale, Lieutenant Sulu, and Dale P, Mike, and Bill. Thank you all very much for supporting the podcast in various ways, supporting avgadgets.com as well. Tom is the editor-in-chief over there, and that is very nice.
So I want to thank Bertrand, Dale P, Daniel, Dale, Lieutenant Sulu guy, and Mike for sending us notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during our ongoing pandemic.
That's for sure. Bertrand, Dale, Daniel, other Dale, and Mike, thank you all so much for those notes of gratitude to us. The notes of encouragement are definitely appreciated. So a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
For AV Rant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com.
This is AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.